Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first Media Cloud webinar. My name is Anushka Shah, and I work as a researcher on Media Cloud. I'm based at the MIT Media Lab, where we're currently hosting and recording this webinar. So I have here with me Natalie Jenis, who's also a researcher on Media Cloud, Rahul Bhargava, who's our CTO, and Cindy Bishop, who's a developer on the project. And all four of us will be taking you through the webinar today. We're all really excited about this, not just because it's the first Media Cloud webinar that we're doing, but also because in the last year, we've been working really hard to help Media Cloud grow from a tool that's mainly for technologists to a tool that can be used by a much wider audience. So that's including academics, journalists, activists, nonprofits, and media researchers. A lot of this has involved making the data more robust, adding new features, and most importantly, trying to make the interface easier to use. Which I'm sure if anyone has used this tool about a year or so ago, the interface was not as pretty as it is now. We're a small team between the Media Lab at MIT and Harvard's Berkman Klein Center. So the project is a joint collaboration between the two centers. We work as a nonprofit, and we're entirely open source and free because the aim is to make Media Cloud available to as many people as we can. That also means that we have some constraints and we're often battling bugs. So the feedback and input of our community of users is a really critical part of our evolution. Cool. So before I introduce Media Cloud, a quick note on the logistics of the webinar. It will be 60 minutes long in total. We'll demo for the first 40 minutes, while the last 20 is for Q&A. So feel free to post your questions in the box that you see on the right labeled questions, either during or after the demo. Cindy will be moderating these, and we're going to try our best to answer all of them during the demo. But for the ones that we can't, we'll post the questions and their answers on our support group later. Our support group, if you haven't already joined that, that's at groups.io/mediacloud. It's where the community shares, research and any questions that they might have. You can also see it on our website homepage on the top tab where you see the support tab, and you'll be able to access the group from there. Great, so let's get started. As you can see on the screen that we've shared, this is the homepage of the Media Cloud website. So Media Cloud, in one line, is an open source platform for media analysis. Think of it as a massive database of news content from around the world. We currently pull news data from over 60,000 sources from over 160 countries and in over 20 languages. At last count, we had over 785 million news articles, or what we refer to as stories, in the database. So that's a lot of data, right? And in order to make sense of this data, Media Cloud offers three tools for analysis. So I'm going to scroll lower down to the homepage, which introduces these three tools. So we have Explorer, Topic Mapper, and Source Manager. Explorer is your first go-to tool to play around with the database, kind of like a Google search where you put in any term or set of terms that you're keen on looking at, but where you can tailor your results by choosing a specific news source or a collection of news sources, such as US mainstream media or US Native American media, or then Japanese blogs. The selection range is really wide. And you can also select a particular date range. So once you put these inputs in, Explorer will give you the overall attention that topic gets in the news, the sources and stories that drive that conversation, the language used to talk about it, and the people and places mentioned in it. Now, Topic Mapper is a more advanced version of Media Cloud. So it gives you a lot more data and features of analysis. And Natalie and Rahul are going to take you through both of these, so you'll get more of an idea of the difference in depth of Topic Mapper in a bit. So you can use either Explorer or Topic Mapper to ask questions like, how much attention are the Austin bombings getting in the mainstream US press right now? Which news outlet, is the most influential in Kenya when it comes to election coverage? Or how is the recent trade war being framed in China in the English language news versus the Chinese news there? So that's a little bit of how you can use Explorer and Topic Mapper. And lastly, Source Manager. So that's kind of like the librarian who manages all of this data and all of these sources. Here you can explore all the sources we have, the collections they're organized into by country, language, and media type, or then suggest new sources that you think we should add into the system. So we'll now start with a demo of Explorer and what the interface looks like. And I'll pass it on to Natalie to take you through Explorer.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to thank you again for your interest in Media Cloud as we start to take you through these tools, and definitely do make sure to post any questions, thoughts, or ideas in the chat box or in the question feature. So the Media Cloud Explorer tool is sort of one of the two main ways that you can interface with our entire news media database. So here's our landing page, explorer.mediacloud.org, and as we scroll down, you can see us highlighting, many of the features embedded within the Explorer tool. We see the opportunity to search within global coverage. You see some visualizations of how we track attention over time, some of our word visualization features to understand how the issues are referenced, and a geographic map to show which countries and contexts are being referenced for a particular query that you're running. And if we scroll back up to the top, that's kind of where our searching box is, and also the user guide that details how you can put together a query depending on what your research interests are. This user guide can provide some help with building more complex searches. And in order to access these features, it's helpful if you register for a free account with your email and then validate your account by just clicking on the link in that email. Then you're set to start analyzing the information. So as an example, taking you through the tool, let's look at how the topic of climate change is covered in news media. So with our initial interface here, we can see that there are a few defaults. The first default is the select media feature. So it shows which collection we're searching into, and our default is US top online news media sources. And we also see a default of the date range. So the default date range is over the last 2 weeks, and both of these can be changed. So here we'll look at the last year of coverage. We'll look at 2017 to 2018. And search through the results. So here, again, our default, we're only looking for one query. We're analyzing climate change in US media, though there is the possibility to add additional queries for comparative search, and we'll run through that process shortly. So in the Explorer tool, we've divided the analysis outputs and visualizations into 3 main categories. We see attention, as Anushka mentioned, which is the what. What does media coverage look like over the time period selected for the particular topic being queried? We also have language, or the how. So how has the media covered this topic? With what key terms is the topic you're searching for being discussed? And we have people and places, or the who. Who is being referenced the most frequently with specifics to the topic that you've been searching for. So if we look down through the attention feature, we see a couple of visualizations. We see this pulse graph showing information over time. We see the total attention, or the total number of stories that match your query in our database. Here we have about 44,000. We see the top themes that are being referenced in coverage of this particular topic, and we can get a sample of the stories that match your query. And all of this information is downloadable into Excel CSV files. So if you're interested in doing a more in-depth or qualitative analysis to accompany the visualizations in this feature, you're able to do that and conduct your own analyses. So that's looking through the attention category, and next we're gonna head into the language feature. So here we see the top terms used the most frequently with reference to our topic, and we have a word clustering visualization as well that puts together terms that are used the most frequently in conjunction with one another. And this visualization we're continuously iterating upon, so if you have any particular thoughts on how this information is presented, again, we're always ready to accept and listen to and hopefully learn from any feedback that you might have. Finally, we have our people and places feature, or the who. So you're looking at which particular entities, individuals, people, or organizations are being the referenced most frequently for the topic that we're looking at. Here we can see that climate change is a heavily politicized topic in the United States. And the organizations referenced also are a reflection of that. Thankfully, we see the United Nations on the list. It is a global issue. And we can also see a geographic heat map of which countries are referenced the most frequently for this particular topic that we're searching for. So we mentioned a little bit earlier that there's also the possibility of adding additional queries, so you can do a comparative search. For example, if you're interested in understanding how two different countries' media ecosystems refer to the same topic. So here, what we're going to do is add a different media collection to search into. And let's compare coverage of climate change in US media with media in India. So we'll add that to our task list by clicking on the collection we're interested in and removing the collection that we didn't want to search into. And before we run this search, let's just check out what's in the media collection itself. So we'll click on India, and it'll load up our source manager page that we mentioned before. So this interface will allow you to click on any of the source collections, and you can actually explore what's contained within the collection you're looking into. So here we see that within that India collection, we have 685 media sources, and it comes with a list of all of them. We see the representation of these sources when compared with the entire media source collection. And there are additional visualizations to help understand how the data has been collected from these media sources over time. Again, in this sources tool, you can find any of our collections. You can search into them. And do keep in mind that we have the availability to search into source collections from around the world. So within our source manager tool, you can browse geographic collections from any country, and we have language capabilities for each of them. So if you have particular questions about research involving specific language or language comparisons, that's definitely something that you can reach out to us about. We have these collections that are disaggregated by country as well as by state and region within those countries. So you can do within country comparisons as well. So getting back to our Explorer screen, we've decided we want to search into India and we want to compare that with US media coverage. Perfect. So we'll get back to our main screen and we have this comparison query. We want to look at climate change again. So now when we load this interface, all of our visualizations are now refreshed and show a comparison between the two media ecosystems that we're studying, the blue being our original US media collection and the orange being our Indian media collection. And as we scroll down, we can see that these new visualizations are really helpful for comparing key themes and how they differ between the two topics that we're looking at. So in an Indian context, we see that the most predominant theme with reference to climate change is politics and government. But that said, it's still, if we hover over the circle, we can see the percentage of coverage referencing this topic, and it's only 20%. So when we compare that with US media coverage, for example, and we look at how much politics and government is being covered there, 40% of climate change coverage in the United States references politics and government. So we see a lot more of a political presence in overall coverage surrounding climate change in the United States than in India, for example. Another useful comparison is to head back to our language feature, where you can compare through word clouds the top terms used by these two different media ecosystems to discuss the same topic. So you can look at the individual word clouds, or you can look at the comparison word clouds. So this is a really interesting feature that we use as kind of a first attempt at qualitatively understanding these different media ecosystems for the topic of climate change. So the word cloud in the middle highlights key terms that are used by both US news media and Indian media when referencing the topic of climate change. And in the box, in the word cloud on the left, we see terms unique to climate change in the US media ecosystem, while on the right, we see words unique to climate change in the Indian media ecosystem. What's interesting here is, again, of course, in the US, we see a lot of reference to domestic issues regarding climate change. We also see the term skeptic and with relation to climate change skepticism, which is less of a theme as we see than in Indian media. But in Indian media, we also see some interesting terms emerging, like the concept of terrorism, which relates to kind of energy policy and the relationships between India and Middle Eastern countries that are concerned with specifically Saudi Arabia and Qatar's sanctions imposed and the relationship that will have on energy and energy policy in India. So what you can do from here is a little bit more advanced is when you're interested, you can click on any of these key terms and it will add them to your original query. If you're interested in diving more deeply into how is climate change and ministry referred to with reference in India, or agriculture, or mitigation. So in the Explorer tool, essentially, it can be used to answer questions about one particular media ecosystem, or it can compare different media ecosystems, different date ranges, and hopefully start to answer some preliminary questions you might have about media ecosystems more broadly. And this is within looking into our existing database. In order to expand the sources and stories that you're interested in searching into, maybe sources outside of our existing database, we can use the topic mapper tool, which Rahul will present a little bit more information about.
Hello, everyone. This is Rahul Bhargav here, and I help on the technology side of these projects. So as Natalie was just describing, that's some of what we have in Explorer, and of course, that's great for narrowing in on the kinds of questions and topics you want to dig into. But of course, once you start a research project or you actually want to answer some deeper questions, you want to sort of dig in with a bit more effort. And we support that in a couple different ways with a topic. And what a topic is basically, it gives you a couple of things on top of what Explorer is. The first is that it expands your coverage. So what we can do is we start with a certain set of stories, but then we add more stories. And we do that by saying, okay, we've got these maybe 50,000 stories match your query in the database. We grab all those stories, and then we follow all the links, and then grab all those stories. And then we follow all the links in those stories. So we basically try to keep on finding all the stories that are linked, and then we filter them in the same way to match your query. And then we add them in this topic. So that we call that process spidering. And basically Topic Mapper, this tool, lets you add in more content that we might not have in our database by doing that. So that's the first thing you can do, is expand your scope to sources that we might not have in our database. The second thing that Topic Mapper lets you do is, and I'm looking, sorry, I just forgot to describe, I'm looking at a topic about climate change in 2016 that we have in our system. And this is actually a public one that you can explore. So this is the homepage for the topic, and you'll see similar charts. One of them you see is the top stories. And we can say top stories because Topic Mapper supports a couple different measures of influence of a story. Now, of course, this is super hard to talk about, but researchers do it in a couple different ways, and we do it, and we also support those. One is we look at linking behavior. So we look at the links between all the stories, and you can see that here, where these stories right now are sorted by the top number of inlinks from other media sources. So this story was linked to from 91 other media sources. So we can actually try to use that as one metric for influence. Another metric for influence that we support is Facebook shares. Any story that's in a topic, we go and we add the number of Facebook shares that it had at a specific point in time. We don't do that ongoing, it just grabs a snapshot. And you can also use that as a measure of influence for social magnification. This linking behavior also lets you do network maps. So you can download a more complicated file, we don't support that in the interface, to look at network maps, either based on word usage or based on linking behavior. So again, you can dig into it more deeply. So that's two things that Topic Mapper supports. A third is the slicing and dicing. So we have an interface that lets you basically, we support slicing and dicing by time automatically in all topics. And then within each topic, we let you create what we call subtopics to capture conversations that are more detailed or different ways of talking about the issue. We support that in a couple different ways. If you have a hypothesis, you could search for a specific keyword and say, okay, give me all the climate change articles within this topic that mention the EPA in the US, which is the regulatory body for environment. And then that would give you one section. And then you could compare that to another subtopic, which might find all the mentions of an environmental or like Greenpeace, and then compare their coverage. We support a couple different automated ways to do that as well. We support doing it based on country attention. So we would automatically find, as you saw in the Explorer, the top 10 countries that have the most stories that reference them. And then we would create those as subtopics for you so you could compare how climate change is talked about in the American media when it comes to India or China. We have a measure of audience partisanship, where we have 5 different collections. One is far left sources, center, center right, and right sources. We've created those based on some other work, so you can basically do a split in American media. You can break things down by those themes that you saw in the Explorer, or you can break things down and slice and dice by media type. So how are, for instance, broadcast outlets reporting on this versus, say, digital native outlets? So there's a couple of ways to slice and dice. And of course, just to get technical for a second, all of this information is available via an API. If you are a developer or have developers on your team, you can get this data out through the API. And in fact, all of our web tools are built on top of that API. And that's documented on our website, on the MediaCloud.org website. You can make your own topic in this menu up here that you see, create a new topic, and that lets you specify the same things, the keywords, the media sources and collections, and the date range. And we have some limits because we're a free tool, and of course we're supported by grants, so you can't make a topic that is 1 million stories from the last 10 years. We have different sources, have different coverage. So some sources we have 5 years of, some we have 3 months of. So you got to poke around and try to figure out what support we have. It's also a great type of question to ask in either our support group, which Anushka mentioned already, or we have a mailing list as well. That's the mailing list that we use. Okay, so just to review, Topic Mapper helps you dig in more deeply than Explorer by letting you find more content by this spidering process of following links, measuring influence in a couple of different ways, cross-linking behavior and Facebook shares, slicing and dicing by time or media source or what they're talking about. And you can get all that via an API, and you can make your own topics. Okay, so I think I'm going to hand it off to Anushka to talk about some of what you can do with this stuff and some of what we do with it before we get to a summary of sort of the questions that people are asking.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Rahul. So as Natalie and Rahul, went through, now you have an idea of what the 3 tools, Explorer, Topic Mapper, and Source Manager are that are built on top of this massive library. And the features that we've, created here allow you to explore and ask certain questions, right? But like Rahul said, there's also an API, and you can download all of this data via CSVs. So there's a lot that you can do even beyond the features that the interface itself permits. So on our website, on the press and publications page, which you'll see in the on the top tab, you'll see a list of some of the work we've done. So our work and our outputs tend to be targeted in 3 ways. One aspect of that is creating research for foundations, nonprofits, activists that we work with. That stuff is often not public, but that's one strand of our research. The second strand is writing for popular press. The 2016 US election made it pretty exciting for the media to comment on the media, which was not so much of a trend before. So this tool ends up being a good tool for journalists, to analyze large trends of how the media is talking about certain issues. So we've started writing more for popular press as well. A lot of our other users who work at organizations like 538 or PRI also use this tool to write for their publications, as you can see on the list here. If you go further down to look at the publications, there are examples of a few more detailed research pieces that we've done. So one is a publication about how the networked public sphere applies to modern health communication and the Ebola epidemic. So you can check that out on our website. Another, as you can see listed second, is a study about the 2016 elections led by our colleagues over at the Berkman Klein Center that looked at over 1.25 million stories during the election and the role that Breitbart played in shaping that conversation. A slightly older paper that we have is one about Trayvon Martin and how his death got the attention of the national news media. So that paper explores how it went from being a local controversy to a national controversy. And Rahul is actually currently working on a paper around media attention to the deaths of unarmed people of color in the US. And a lot of our research has implications for those working in advocacy and social organizations. So, please do check out our research listed here. One of the other things that I, wanted to go over before we go into Q&A is a couple of FAQs that we often get asked, and I'll just go over a couple of those quickly, and then we can dive straight into Q&A. So one of the questions we get asked often is, how can we add sources that aren't in Media Cloud yet? A lot of you do research in different countries in different topic areas, and you might have specific sources that you wanted to add in. The short answer is that we're very open to adding new sources and trying to support your research in any way. So, please do send in your suggestions. Once you're on Source Manager, there is a tab there that allows you to suggest sources. So you can input your source there and we review that regularly. You can also post on a support group or just email us directly about it. The second question that we often get asked is, what's the difference between Media Cloud and Google? And I mentioned this at the start, but really the difference is that Media Cloud lets you tailor your search so you can look at specific news sources or collections and also a date range. And you also know kind of what algorithm is being used to list your outputs, which you often can't see with large tech platforms. Do you need to pay to use Media Cloud? Again, something we get asked often. Answer is no, not at all. It's totally free and open source. So there's absolutely no payment required. You just have to set up an account, as Natalie mentioned earlier, through our website. Does it provide news alerts? So this is something we don't do. We get asked often, but we just thought we should clarify that. Providing news alerts is not something Media Cloud does. You can, of course, track any topic that you're interested in regularly through the platform. Do your tools provide sentiment analysis? So sentiment analysis is something we actually don't do, primarily because we feel like the methods, developed for this so far don't apply very well to news data itself. So no, we don't provide sentiment analysis, but of course you can get access to any of the story URLs through our API or the CSVs, and you can go ahead and perform any of your own analysis on that data. And a last FAQ question is, what social media analysis do you offer? So within the tool itself, we offer Facebook shares for every single story in the database. For more in-depth research, we also provide access to Twitter analysis. That's something you have to separately email us for because it's not freely available on the platform. We partner with another organization for that. So of course, if you write to us and the research, is your research keen on looking at Twitter analysis, we're more than happy to work with you on that. So yeah, I think we've covered most of what we wanted to do, our demo and our FAQs. So I think we'll dive straight into Q&A. Cindy's been moderating that, so she's going to read out some of the questions that have been asked, and we'll try and answer those.
Hi, everyone. Cindy here. Let's see. We've got a couple of really great questions here. Oh, and sorry, I just see that someone was unable to see the feed. We can definitely answer some questions that you might have further down the road. Let's see. How about the question that we have here? Do Facebook shares in-link data come from a snapshot only at the time the query is run?
I'll jump in on that one. This is Rahul here. It's a more technical question. So the Facebook share data is basically a count that we grab at one point in time, and you can actually download, when you download the list of stories within a topic, you can get that date Of course, it varies quite a bit because it's about when we get the story into our system. So we have done analysis with it. If that police violence paper that Anushka mentioned specifically uses that data to make a model about Facebook sharing. So that's the short answer to that question.
Okay, another sort of more general question is probably to Natalie. We just mentioned, it's from Julia Burns. You just mentioned language comparisons, but I missed it. But that's one of her main questions, various language sources and how they are handled.
Yeah, of course. So I hope I'm answering your question correctly, and definitely add in any follow-up if there's more information that it would be helpful if we answered. Essentially, I like to use language comparisons when I'm trying to understand differences between how two different media sources, two different media ecosystems in particular countries talk about an issue, or how the way that the news media talks about a topic has changed over time. So comparing two different date ranges. And the top words feature that we highlighted, that word cloud, shows the key terms that are used most often in the news stories that match your query. So one example of a recent research question that we've been looking at is how, with reference to immigration, how the term unauthorized immigrant in US media compares with illegal immigrant, and what the broader narratives around those two terms are. And I wish at this point I could share some interesting findings about that, but we've just started on that research. So definitely keep updated on our website to find some more information about that. Another interesting piece of research that we've conducted has actually direct implications to the term research. So looking at how different media sources in the US talk about new information that emerges specifically with reference to health. And we find that some media sources, particularly within our right-leaning audience collection that Rahul mentioned, uses the word study with reference to new information, whereas our left-leaning audience collection uses the word research. Research implying a body of research, a body of evidence through which new information is applied and contextualized, versus study, which refers to one new piece of information that emerges and is much more easy to either take out of context, reinterpret, or interpret in problematic ways. So with this language feature, it helps us understand the underlying narratives and key themes that emerge when you're searching for a particular topic.
Natalie,
I hope that was helpful.
Good. I think we can handle some more of the drill downs and offline. We have another question in from Elisa. She wants to know about topics. Can she type in a topic in Spanish or Arabic, for example?
Yeah, and I'll quickly jump in here. And I think this was also Julia's followed up her question by saying I think she was interested in understanding about translations, and I think her language question was also looking to that. So yes, the answer is yeah, you can put in a search in Spanish or Arabic. We do not do translations. So we offer the language sources in their original languages and as the original data is.
Well, we'll just stay on topics real quick, and then we'll hit some sources and explore questions. I think people generally want to know, how would they monitor a topic? How could they create a topic? How can they get information about that topic?
So you can create your own topic, as Rahul mentioned, on the topic mapper page. There's a button right on top that says create a topic. When it comes to monitoring a topic, we don't provide regular refreshing or regular feeds about that. You can go in and change and alter the topic, at any point, expand the search criteria, expand the search date range. And no, you cannot get email updates about it, unfortunately.
I'll chime in with one extra piece there. We have some technical limitations built into our tool because it is free and open. So as a regular user, once you have an account, you can make topics of a certain size, and you can make a certain number of queries into the system per week. So we have some limiting, and basically that's to make sure our system doesn't get overrun. So if you find yourself running into that problem, email us and ask us about what you're doing. because often we end up being able to collaborate or help you structure your query so it's a bit more optimal and doesn't use up as much resources. But just to let you know, we aren't some magical infinite Google that has 5 bajillion servers in a closet. We're a handful of people that are trying to help other folks do this type of research.
Awesome. Thanks, Rahul. We've got a question from Piyush, and the question is, will it consider the stories that have the keyword climate change in the text of the story or in the headline or both?
You can do either. The default is the text of the search, but actually I just flipped. If you look at your screen again, on the Explorer, underneath where you enter the query, there's a little link that says "Learn about writing queries," and that gives you some extra information on how to do it. But there's a way to be able to specify just in the headlines. And then search those. But we find that there's some research methodology issues that you want to be careful of when you try doing headline-based search or text-based. So it's definitely something to be careful about from a research point of view.
I see a couple of questions about time periods, in particular for sources. How do we get the start data for various media sources? And then more precisely from somebody else, is there a way to compare time periods in larger units than a week or a month? For example, compare coverage of an issue January through June or July through December.
Yeah, so in Source Manager, you can actually click on any source or collection, and it'll give you a lot of data about that particular source or collection, including when that source started collecting data. So you can definitely go back and see how long that source has been, in our system. Usually the way we add any content in our system is through the RSS feed of that particular source. And so the moment it's in our system, it starts collecting data from that point onwards. So a lot of our US sources, which is what, when we started building Media Cloud, we really started with that, goes back about 8 years. A lot of the other international sources are, I would say, relatively newer in the last 1 year. So it goes back for about a year. The second part of the question was, I'm forgetting that.
Oops, sorry, we moved on to the next set of questions.
I think the date comparisons, the bulk date comparisons.
Oh, right. Yes. Thanks, Nat. Yeah. So you can definitely compare bulk date comparisons. Within a particular topic, it allows you to slice the topic by a week or month. But if you're searching in Explorer or creating a new topic, it can be as large as you like. We've done searches that, that expand over 2 to 5 years. Usually the recommendation, though, is that we stick to the last 1 year when you're searching. So let's say Jan 2018 to Jan 2017. And the only reason for that is, and this is if you're creating a topic on Topic Mapper. If you're doing an Explorer, you can go back to 5 years, and that's fine. The reason on Topic Mapper we say go back a year is because, as Rahul explained, it follows a link network, and links tend to rot over time. So it tends to get less accurate when you go back for more than a year on Topic Mapper. But yeah, on Explorer, as large as you like.
What if we back up for the sort of the 10,000 mile view? How widely is Media Cloud being used by the media, including the sources on the platform itself?
So we have, especially if you see on our press page, we have a bunch of media outlets that have been using Media Cloud lately to write stories. So you see articles from the Post, you see us in an article in the New York Times Magazine. So there is a set of our users that are basically media outlets writing about how the media is talking about an issue, which we love. We're super interested in that question. Our more in-depth users tend to be the academics. So that's the short answer to that question.
I see some more questions related to phrases and indexing phrases as well as single words. Perhaps one of our researchers or tech people could explain what that means exactly.
The short story is that you can search through single words or Boolean queries. So you could search for Trump and climate, or a phrase like we did earlier with double quoted climate change. So that was a phrase-based search.
And just to add in here on our in our Explore interface, again, you have that link to user guides at the top left of the screen. And one of those user guides is how to put together these more complex Boolean queries. So feel free to check that out if you're interested in running a query that might be a bit more difficult to narrow down than just one key term.
Great, thanks, Natalie and Rahul. I think there's another, there's more a question or questions regarding specific stories in terms of understanding how a set of stories compares with the overall media landscape for a specific topic.
Yeah, so the question says, is there a way to analyze a specific set of stories? You know, one of the features, as Rahul mentioned when he was going through Topic Mapper, was being able to slice and dice a topic to be able to get at that specific set of stories. So let's say you're looking at, you know, the climate change topic, and you want to understand within climate change, how are the specific set of stories that refer to, I don't know, Trump, right? And you want to see how those specific set of stories are spoken about. You can break that topic down by a keyword search. So you can look at all the stories that reference Trump within climate change. You can also get to that specific set of stories if you're looking within a certain time range, or if you're trying to see how the left versus right media talks about it, or if you're trying to see how do all stories that were under the theme of global warming get talked about. So the moment you create a subtopic to get to a specific set of stories, all of the features that we showed you on Topic Mapper change, so all the data under those features changes to reflect those specific set of stories. So you can certainly analyze a topic by a specific set of stories.
We've got a question here about the NLP algorithm. Could we briefly share how topics are discovered for a certain query?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. The initial set of what we call seed stories is basically any story in our database already that matches the Boolean query that you've created. So, you know, that's basically the keyword search, like you would do on any search engine. And then we automatically turn that into a search that's applied to any new story that's pulled into the system. So when we follow a hyperlink, the technical way we do it, if you're interested in that, is we automatically turn that query into a regular expression and apply that regular expression to any story that comes into our system that we discover through a link. The high-level view of that is that we basically apply the same search to any story that we pull in by following a link, and then either include it or leave it out.
Great, thanks, Rahul. Yet another question. This is regarding the subtopics, I think. How do you determine the inclination, liberal or conservative, of the people who are sharing the media stories on Twitter? Sure,
I'll jump into that one. So this is some great work from our Harvard colleagues. They published a fantastic study on the US election that if you haven't read, you should read. It's linked on the MediaCloud.org homepage on the Press and Publications tab. You'll find it there. The short story is that it was about they looked at followers of Trump and followers of Clinton during the election season in the US. And then they looked at the media sources, the top 1,000 most shared media sources by those followers. And then they basically computed a ratio. So for something like Breitbart, for every story shared by someone that followed Trump, how many times was a story shared by a follower of Clinton? So you can imagine they ended up with a ratio, and that ratio then let us take those 1,000 most shared sources and put them into a bucket by left or right partisanship. Again, that only applies in the US. It's only for the 1,000 most shared sources by Twitter followers of those two during that election season. And it's turned out to be really useful for American analysis. So again, read their executive summary to get more information.
Thank you. So it looks like we've got some questions regarding queries themselves, and also some features that are coming that are perhaps not in Explorer yet. Right. So perhaps Rahul could sort of discuss what the again one more time about the queries. And
so Explorer is our main tool for poking around. Folks that have used Media Cloud before are probably familiar with our dashboard tool, which used to be the main tool for that. We've been replacing that with Explorer for a bunch of technical reasons that involve around maintenance and how flexible it is. So someone asked about the copy query function. That's actually still there. If you look at the Explorer interface, there's two tiny, next to where it says enter a query, there's a tiny little icon that is two arrows. That's how you copy the settings for a query from one of them to all of them. And that's the same for the dates and the sources. So that's just for people that have used Media Cloud before. That's helpful information.
Excellent. Some more questions regarding dates, past years, date and link rot. This is across both Explorer and Topic Mapper. So Anushka, you want to answer that?
Yeah. So you know, link rot is a problem when you look at a topic on Topic Mapper. So if you're trying to do, and I think the question specifically asked whether you can do the same analysis 2 years out as we could do today on data gathered. We usually recommend not going back by more than a year when it comes to looking at data on Topic Mapper, and that's because of the link rot. But if you're going to be looking at this on Explorer, then no, that's not a problem. You can go back as long as you'd like.
If we have those sources.
Right, of course, assuming we have those sources, yeah.
I would guess that people probably have questions about slicing and dicing. We've got a sub-corpora question regarding to probably how you analyze partisanship and keywords.
So we could dig into that more about slicing and dicing things, but the short sort of thing to share is that you can combine collections and sources in lots of different ways to both dig in on Explorer or on Topic Mapper, and we're trying to improve that quite a bit. So you'll see over the next few months, we're continually rolling out new ways to slice and dice and select different media sets. So it's something we actively do and we're more interested in doing, and Anushka and Natalie are great at pushing us forward on new ways to do that.
Okay, let's see. Do you guys have anything else you want to add, given what the questions are that you see here?
I think there's one question that's about whether, when we're looking at international sources, whether we're looking at just English language sources from those countries. And no, so we have data from about 20 different languages, which includes Spanish, French, Hindi, Hausa, Chinese, Japanese. So we definitely have a variety. In India, we look at, yes, the English language sources, but also the Hindi language sources. In Nigeria, we look at English and Hausa. For a lot of the other international countries, our default, is English language to start with. And that's primarily because when it comes to adding a new language, and I think there's another question about this as well, so I'll just answer the whole thing here. But when it comes to adding a new language, and it takes a certain amount of, NLP support to be able to doing that, coming up with the right stemmers, the right stop words list. And so it does take a little bit of not just the tech team's input, but also for the research team to know that when we curate a new collection, it has to be done really carefully. We want to make sure we're representing the mainstream sources in any country, but we also want to make sure that we're representing the underrepresented voices in each country. So usually when we're creating a new collection, we'll start by ABYZ is our first database that we go to that lists national and state sources for any country. The next thing we do is get audience data to see what are some of the most read publications in that country. But then finally, we work with journalists and experts from each country to make sure that we're not missing out on any sources. And this is especially true when we're working in non-English language sources, because to be able to ensure that if we're adding a non-English language, how accurate is our data crunching around that? We need a language expert to work on that. So we're very open to adding languages that we don't have. If you have a specific research topic and the expertise in that language, we're more than happy to partner.
So I can answer a short question about Topic Mapper. If you see the word snapshots in there, the idea of that is that it's because it's our history is a research support tool. So we have a bunch of features baked in that are really about driving reproducible research. That can make things more complicated when we're just trying to do things quickly. Snapshots is an example of that. In Topic Mapper, a snapshot is basically a picture in time of all the data that is in one topic. And you have multiple of those. So if you add a new way to slice and dice, a new subtopic, then you have to generate a new snapshot. so that you don't pollute the previous version in case you were doing research on it. So there's some complexity there because this is we're not a marketing tool. We are a research support tool. So there's a couple of things that are baked in for that.
Just and for those of you who haven't had your questions answered and may not in the next 10 minutes, we will be able to address those questions after the end of this webinar if they're very specific questions about what you are particularly trying to do in your research studies. Do we feel that we covered the how spidering is covered? Do we talk about that? There were a couple more questions, but they may have chimed in later. Let's see what else we have.
So I think there's one question about the network maps that Rahul mentioned. So the question says, could you show us a basic or frequently used network map application with the spider link structure? There's, if you see the press and publications page on our website, there are, quite a few research pieces that use these maps. I think we're just... So you could go into any of these publications here, and that'll give you a kind of an idea of what those maps look like. We use Gephi to create those maps, and the files available to download on each topic page are Gephi files.
Okay, well, let's see. We have a couple of more questions. We can go into some more specific questions here that people have. I think, again, around languages and word clouds and where the words are coming from and if they're represented in different languages.
Yeah, so sometimes, usually we try and keep a collection that is about English language sources purely with English language sources in them. So the idea is that it would only reflect an English language word cloud. What tends to happen, especially in a place like India, where, which is a media ecosystem that I do a lot of the research on, is that they tend to, often reference a Hindi language source in that or another regional language source. So sometimes the word cloud might have a mention of the other language, but if you are selecting a single language source collection, it should not have multiple languages. If you decide to add into your query an English language collection and a Hindi language collection, it might give you a mix there. So it definitely has the ability to give you multiple languages in one word cloud. I think we can take a last one question.
Yeah.
So there's
someone asked the press and publications. I just pulled that up. The press and publications that I mentioned feature some of the ways other sources are using our stuff, and then as well papers that we've written, and that's available on our mediacloud.org webpage. If you hit the press and publications link, the case studies also has some other examples.
Why don't we cover sort of wrap up with the where people can go after this webinar? How can they get access to questions, to FAQs, to a support group, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to wrap up. So first of all, thank you everybody for your patience and for watching this demo. Like we said, this is the first time we're doing this, and we've been really excited to share kind of where Media Cloud is at right now. So like Cindy mentioned, in terms of following up, you can go to our website, mediacloud.org. That's really where we've been referencing these pages from. If you click on the support tab right there on the top, you're able to link in here and register for an account. It sends you, all you have to do is register your name, your email, it sends you a link, and you click on that link and you're logged in. You can access our user guides that are mentioned here on the support page. There's one that gives an introduction to Media Cloud. There's another that helps you write media queries. And there's another, there are a couple of user guides to do research using Media Cloud. You can also join our groups.io group. That's a really helpful space where we have about, a few hundred researchers that use Media Cloud, really sharing the research that they do, really interesting insights and asking questions if there's something they're not sure with, or able to look up other people's past questions. And you can use our public API to access any of our data. There's also an entire FAQ section on this page that is a good, helpful starter for Media Cloud. And of course, anything that's outside of this, if there's anything you're confused about, any research you want to partner with us for, feel free to write to us at support@mediacloud.org. Yeah, I think that's all we have for today. Thank you so much again. And just to let you know that this was being recorded as well. It's only for internal purposes. And we might be posting this later on the website as well for other people to see. So thank you so much and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.